Hello, committee. It's nice to be here with you guys tonight. We got a few members of the general public back there. So just really at a high level, our goals in the department are to be safe. We don't want any students or employees hurt or bullied on a school bus. We want to be effective. We want students to arrive at school ready to learn every day. And we want to be efficient and conserve our taxpayer resources. I've got a couple little commercials there over on the right. We're always hiring drivers. Does anybody ever get those messages from us about your child's bus going to be a little bit late? Occasionally. When do you not get them, right? That's more like it. I've got 40 open positions right now. If you know anyone that's interested in driving a school bus, we would love to bring them onto our team. Won't belabor that point. But safety, you see the three little cute girls there, they're wearing seat belts. Henrico County made the conscious decision to add seat belts to our new school buses. We've been doing that for 3 years now. We have 88 new buses with seat belts that are equipped. I'm hoping that we're going to pick up the pace on bus replacement a little bit. One of the many budget items that our leaders are looking at, we would love to have all of our kids in seat belts a little quicker than our current pace. So one of the questions that's come out is, how do we evaluate all of our routes? Do you look at safety every year like it says you are going to be by law? So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on here because there's not really a single document. The question was, hey, did you guys do a report to the board each of the last 3 years or so that talks about how you have evaluated routes? This is what Allison and 5 people do every day of the year, every day of the school year. And the first couple bullets just describe what we're trying to achieve. We've got what I call our key constraints, our bell schedules. We've got 4 tiers. We've got Tier 1 elementary, then we've got Tier 2 elementary that starts 30 minutes later. Middle schoolers start another 30 minutes after that, and high school after that. Many of our drivers can serve all 4 tiers. And if we can achieve that, that's very efficient. It's not always possible, especially in the East End where we have some long routes. In the Verina district, actually, there's only 1 Tier 2 elementary. That's Baker Elementary School. So primarily in the East, there's 3 tiers that we try to do. And we've got a limited number of buses, and the buses have capacities. We would like a good route to fill up the bus and enable safe and efficient delivery of students to school and home every day. And so how do we build the routes every year and continue to modify them throughout the year? Each spring we graduate about 4,000 students. We have what we call rollover. The students advance to their next grade. We're bringing in a new class of kindergarten students. So when you consider our new kindergartners, 6th graders, and 9th grade students, that's about 12,000 students that are at new schools. Of course, we have people moving in and out of the county, but all of these students have to be assigned to a bus stop and a bus route. So each and every route is going to change, most likely due to that rollover that we do see every summer. And that takes quite a bit of effort for Allison's staff too. And we've got some great software that enables them to do it fairly efficiently, but it's a big piece of work. We have specialty centers. There are many, many opportunities. I know we're talking about zones within redistricting, but there's many opportunities for our students to go to schools outside of our zones, whether it's a gifted zone, out-of-zone center at the elementary level. We have IB programs at the middle school level. We've started the Gifted Young Scholars Academy at Wilder. Each high school has specialty centers. So that's some of the most challenging routing that we do. We have about 56 buses that are devoted to secondary hub systems. We have 4 hubs. We bring the kids in from their neighborhoods to one of the 4 hubs, and they get on a shuttle bus to go to their final destination. But those routes really get scrubbed every year as that population changes because those hub routes change a lot. We take middle school kids directly from Moody, a lot of them to the West End. There's probably 15 to 20 routes that are taking them out of Moody into other districts. Those kids flip and change, so we've got to really scrub hard on those routes. It takes a lot of work. We've got 1,600 students that require specialized transportation. And that's a big business. I sometimes offhandedly say we spend 20% of our budget on 3% of the kids, but they need it. They need it, and it's required by law. So 2 of our 5 routing specialists work on doing the specialized transportation for these students that require it. So we build that pretty much through the spring and summer. We give our drivers the new draft routes, and we ask them to drive their routes about 2 weeks before school starts. They give us feedback. They're out on the road. They can let us know that if we've made a change to a route and it really doesn't make sense, to take a look at it. So we have another turnaround in those 2 weeks to set the new routes in place for the start of school. We do overload adjustments. One of the key variables is ridership. There's certain areas of the county where almost everybody rides the bus. Glen Allen High School, Deep Run High School, a lot of kids drive their own cars. We assign 150 kids to some of those buses because we know it's going to be a low percentage. We have to overbook, but it's an inexact science. You also have the seasonal aspects of kids playing sports and extracurricular activities. So that a bus that had 40 to 50 middle or high schoolers in September might have 60 all of a sudden in December. So we're constantly looking for overloads and getting reports, sometimes that are true, sometimes that are not true. We get counts from drivers. We make adjustments and move stops from route to route if necessary to adjust for those overloads. Another huge task, the McKinney-Vento Homeless Education Assistance Improvement Act of 2001. What does that mean? That means that the 700 students per year that fall into some type of housing crisis are allowed by law to stay in their original home school. So they might have lost their residence in Henrico County and are now living in Southside Richmond. We go get them and we bring them back to their school. They might be in a hotel temporarily. We go get them and we bring them to their home school. It's a lot of resources, a lot of work, and it involves adjusting routes almost every day. I know Allison's staff is showing me how are we going to handle this when they call to the zone office. Can we find a bus that can tack on another stop that might be a significant distance from their normal route? We get school bus request forms submitted by parents and school staff, about 500 a year. The major flood occurs right around the first day of school. Sometimes it's new folks in the community not understanding why their school bus stop is at a certain place. They talk to us about the safety of it. We do an evaluation. Sometimes we issue a denial letter. Sometimes we agree with them and make the change. We actually have an appeal process where we bring in the police and the county traffic engineer if somebody is really concerned that we haven't made that bus stop change that they think is essential for their student. We have new developments. River Mill opened, and we knew it was coming. The first few students moved in August, and we added bus service about 4 weeks after school started. And that's just one of the new developments. There's developments, Libby Mill, we added bus service in there last year. So anytime that we have a new development and we have folks beginning to live in an area where we didn't have children before, we need to add a bus stop and sometimes a bus route to serve those. We talked about a school. Of course, transportation is going to be associated with that school in River Mill. So a lot of work. We get temporary road projects and detours. The railroad track across Laburnum Avenue near Interstate 64 was closed for 3 days. Some of you might live in that area and knew that you couldn't drive on Laburnum. So Allison's staff had to dig in. How many routes, how many buses pass over that every day? About 30 or 40? A good number. So we had to give temporary directions. So we're constantly doing this is the message. And the routes, are they in fact documented in our software? Yes. Each driver has a route sheet. We post our routes at the start of the school year. Folks want to know where their kid's bus stop is, what the bus stop time is. So if you look at the start of the year for a couple of months, we make a post for every school, and you can see all the stops in order for each bus. So these are documented, but no, we don't have a single document to the school board every year that describes all this. And I hope that what I've shared with you provides a little understanding as to how we evaluate routes and make changes. There's been discussion of the non-transportation zones, and I fully understand that and appreciate that. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. What is a non-transportation zone? Well, our policy actually talks about it in two different ways, and it's not exactly a quote here, but the way I've interpreted it is who is not eligible for school bus transportation. If a safe walking path exists, and if a residence is up to 0.3 miles from the elementary school property line, or 0.5 miles from a secondary school property line, those students are not eligible to ride on a school bus. And yes, we get calls, we get letters, we get request forms from people that live in those zones that want a school bus. And we have ample dialogue. We have to be very, very consistent. And that is ensuring that a safe path exists also. There's some schools that there is no safe path, and we don't have a non-transportation zone. I do want to make the point, because obviously, I think at the last public meeting in Godwin, some folks certainly made the point that, hey, we can walk to school even though we're outside of the non-transportation zone, and that's perfectly fine. If you're outside or you're eligible for transportation, you may walk to school. However, we do not recommend it if a safe walking path does not exist. And there are places where I just drove on Twin Hickory Lake Road today in front of that school. And the county's actually provided a couple of crossing guards, but we provide bus service over there. And what you're going to see is that the county's not going to be providing as many crossing guards into areas where bus transportation is provided. So again, folks can walk to school, but we don't want them crossing roads. Hermitage High School, people shouldn't be walking there. We provide bus service. Kids do it. We don't stop it. We don't write them a referral, but we really prefer that they not. We review these zones and modify them as needed. 33 of the elementary schools have them, and 15 of the secondary schools have non-transportation zones. I'm going to show just a couple of examples, I guess one at each level. Here's Adams Elementary School. I mentioned Laburnum. So you can see it's situated less than a block off of Laburnum, and you see that little zone that's just includes a few streets around Adams where there's probably 10 or 15 children that live there, and they're not provided bus transportation. One of the aunts is the lady that I spent 20 minutes with on the phone. I just can't make that walk. But I'm sorry, ma'am, you're in that, and if you're a block away, you get bus service, and you don't. But those distances are the same distances that we use to go to a bus stop. So it's kind of like, instead of walking to a bus stop that might be up to 0.3 or 0.5 miles away, you're walking to school. And the parents sometimes, with a kindergartner, have to do that with them. But it does not go to the other side of Laburnum. You see Thornhurst there and the opening to that neighborhood. We're not going to have kids walk across Laburnum Avenue. So transportation is provided on the other side of Laburnum. A couple other examples. Here's one, Hungry Creek Middle. So you see the green diamond, or triangle, excuse me. That's where the school is located. And to the north, there are a couple of neighborhoods where the school is accessible by a path maintained by Parks and Recreation. The Castle Point neighborhood is there to the west portion of that block, and there's a road called Topping Lane, which comes down from the direction of Glen Allen High School, and that's all the non-transportation zone. We've got a boundary, Francistown Road. There's kids right across the street, but we don't expect them to walk because we don't want them to cross Francistown Road. But this is another community where I have people that call every year, can't we get a bus further down Topping Lane? And Godwin High School, that's one of the ones we know is certainly under a lot of discussion here as you're looking at some of your redistricting options. Godwin is there to the west here, right on Pump Road. We provide service across Pump Road. We provide service north of Ridgefield Parkway. The residential sections to the northeast and the south of Godwin, we do not provide service because a safe walking path exists. So I hope that clarifies a little bit. These are zones where we don't provide service. If you're in those zones, you're not eligible to ride the bus. If you're outside these zones, you're eligible to ride the bus. We're going to provide a bus, but you don't have to use it. Folks can walk. We just hope that you'll only do it if there's a safe walking path. So, if we do redistricting, we move these zone lines, that's going to change some bus routes. It's undeniable. It has to. Kids are going to be going to different schools, and we're going to provide bus service. So again, let's say those key constraints are still those bell schedules, the 4 tiers and bus capacities. I'm going to say once again, a good route fills up the bus and enables safe and efficient delivery of students to school and home. So after you redistrict, and I say you, the committee is going to work obviously with staff, and the school board will eventually make that decision in the interest of the greater good. Some students may have shorter or longer bus rides as the boundaries move. It's not going to be wouldn't it be great if everybody had a shorter bus ride after redistricting? But frankly, it's just not going to be the case. And it's based on our geography of the way our schools are laid out and where the population is. You're going to move these boundaries to try to fill up some buildings. And some students are going to have a longer bus ride. One of the things we would like to do is maximize the use of non-transportation zones. The most recent redistricting at the middle school level, good for us in transportation, brought back kids to Short Pump Middle School that were in the walk zone but had been bused to Holman. Thankfully, that got changed. And I think we've got at least one opportunity here. It's at the secondary level. I think West Broad Village can certainly have some folks go to Pocahontas, and I see that that's in both of the options, and I won't belabor that any further because that's not an elementary topic. We want to stay within the bell schedules. We prefer less routes, not more. So when I talked about those bell schedules and kind of every 30 minutes, ideally a bus could serve in each of those 30-minute blocks. What we want to avoid is to have a longer route so that now, let's say a route that's going to a middle school now gets lengthened and cannot serve Tier 2 elementary. That bus was serving 4 schools, Tier 1, Tier 2, middle, and high. Now we've lengthened a bus route and we don't have that opportunity to use that resource for one of those tiers. So that's an outcome that we want to try to avoid in redistricting. And that's one of the things we'll hopefully be able to advise you on. And of course, we want to maintain safety. We have just done a couple of examples to show you what some routes might look like if certain options are changed or enacted. Holiday, that's kind of the crux of what the elementary's looking at. I know there's many aspects of your options, but when you look at Holiday, in both options A and B, look over to where it says Skipwith. That's an elementary school. And you can see the Holiday zone would expand down there very close to Skipwith. And so those kids now are on a route that runs from 7 o'clock to 7:20 with 8 stops and 61 students, and the bus is on 4 miles is the length of that route. So what would happen if those kids go to Holiday? What would their busing look like? All right, different type of map. This is out of our Edulog software. But here on the west side of the map, you can see some little purple dots. Those are the same bus stops that we had, but it's not all of them. It's of those 8 bus stops, only 6 of them would be redistricted. So we would have this bus route from 7:04 to 7:20 with 6 stops and 47 students. Remember, it was 4 miles going to Skipwith. It would be 5.7 miles. But actually, it might be a little bit more efficient because we're not picking up as many. There's still 2 stops and 14 students that would remain at Skipwith when would be assigned to another bus. One other example of a sample route, we're looking at River's Edge, which is a packed school, we understand, and we have the options, a couple of options to move some students to Springfield Park. And I believe option B is the one that moves a larger portion of that geography of the southeast zone for River's Edge. So that group of neighborhoods would move from River's Edge to now become the west portion of the Springfield Park zone. And there's actually segments of multiple routes in there, but one route that we looked at in whole is about 22 minutes long, starts at 6:58 to 7:20. It's got 10 stops, 61 students, 4.9 miles. Now I'm going to show you a different map that again comes out of our software. And Allison built a couple of routes, but the one I'm talking about is the one in yellow. So it's the exact same 10 stops in the same 61 students. Now it's only going 4.4 miles, and that route would be done in 15 minutes as opposed to 22, like it is going to River's Edge. Kind of makes a little sense. Springfield Park is a little closer than River's Edge is. So here's a place where we're getting a little bit more efficient. And it's not that the route to River's Edge is bad. You know, they're still getting to school on time every day. But we're certainly seeing that it's not getting any worse. And if anything, you know, by going to a newer school, this happens to be a group of students that will have a shorter bus route, which we said, wouldn't that be great if everybody has a shorter bus route? And that's not necessarily going to be the case. I see a question right here in the committee.
So how do we get this information? So if we draw a map, and, I mean, if we draw a map between now and March, and, I mean, are you redoing routes every time we draw a map? Are you, I mean, what if we totally screw up the bus routes?
Yeah.
And don't realize it? Why, I mean, how could we realize it? Because that's complicated. And I'm shocked that you can get anywhere in 15 minutes with 10 bus stops. And so, like, what I think what we want to avoid is having, you know, like we create maps and then the school board says, oh, we'll just draw our own and vote on that. So how do we get, I mean, are they going to give us this information? Are we going to see how we're affecting the bus routes? Because the other thing is, how does it, like you said, with the staggered bells and stuff, if we're adding 10 minutes to a bus route, I mean, I'm not kidding, my kids sat at the bus stop for 1 hour the other day, and nobody called me. But like, if somebody, and so it's already an issue. I mean, we already have issues that it's not, I mean, it's a nationwide issue, it's not Henrico's fault. But we already don't have enough bus drivers and enough buses, so if we are increasing the time of elementary routes, that's going to screw up the middle school and high school routes.
Yes.
And we're already taking some, I mean, obviously we're taking high school kids on further routes, so we need even more time to do the high school routes. So I guess this is all really useful and fascinating, to be honest, but how do we get this information so we don't screw it all up?
Well, I sincerely appreciate that question. We have 2,400 routes, and so we're not going to build 2,400 routes for each redistricting option along the way. But we want to hear from the committee when you have the questions, is this something that's really going to foul us up? And I haven't, you know, we've gotten a couple of questions about the River's Edge and the Sadler Road neighborhoods and so forth. Somebody asked, well, can you have one bus go this way and that way? And we're able to answer that pretty quickly, but we just cannot do so we're going to look for the hot spots or the sensitive areas. I mean, and hopefully you'll see that as you build a map where, gosh, it looks like this group of kids might really have a longer ride, and it might be so long that they're going to, you know, bump into another tier, and that's what we want to avoid and we want to advise you on.
Yeah, so is there like a list of like best practices? Like no left turns, or, you know what I mean? Like just things that we can keep in mind. I mean, there is some of that when you know the area, you're kind of like, there's no light there, you're never going to get out of there at that time of day kind of situation. But we rely on that like as a group. So if you guys had said, well, like, here's 3 best practices that like help, like that are used, our tools, that might help us to be like, okay, because there are places where we are moving smaller, bigger numbers, or it can, that, you know, we can take that into account and go, oh, this makes sense, that doesn't make sense. And I think, again, we're trying to pull together all of our resources, and I think everybody's done a fantastic job, but sometimes, again, we're not experts in all these other aspects.
One of the things to keep in mind is we're already operating a bus in an area that you might think is a bottleneck. And it just is going to school A, and you're considering, can that group of students go to school B? We're already operating a bus, so we know if that intersection's a big deal. Yes, there's areas we try to avoid left turns. We don't want to make a left turn on a Knuckles Road. We don't stop at stop signs. We always will go around a block even so that the bus controls the intersection as opposed to having the stop sign in the bus's face. So sometimes you might see that, why did that bus go all the way around the block to get our stop? It's really so that it can control the intersection and provide safety to our students. So, goodness, Allison really knows this stuff. And if you're sensing or concerned about an area that, you know, are we making this worse for our students? Or are we making it worse for our transportation system so that, because we don't like missing you for an hour, and I'm sorry you didn't get the message because that wasn't supposed to happen that way. But my theory is the driver didn't call in. Yes, ma'am.
So a while back, we're not secondary, obviously, but they had made an option where, was it Shortcut Middle or Deep Run? But it was all the way down to near Mayberry almost. And you all were there for that time, and we were all like, that's not feasible. And you all walked over and immediately said, oh, there's no way we can get, I mean, within seconds you all looked at it and said, there's no way that we can get those children all the way up from way down south, all the way up past Broad Street all the way to Short Pump Middle. So when we're making these maps and Matthew's showing them, if there's something that's very obvious, very quickly, you will tell him and red flag it and tell us, like, that could
Correct.
happen, right? Like,
Correct.
that's just not gonna happen.
Correct.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to also note is that Mr. Davis said, although they're not doing routes, actual hard routes for every single option, the transportation office is studying these options in detail. She showed me already a couple of markups, a couple areas where there's, where if you included this planning block or census tract with this census tract, it would be more efficient in terms of routes. And so, although they're not doing an entire route for each option, they are studying it in that level of detail. And so I think that they're really combing through the options very well to make sure that as you guys work through it and as it evolves, they're continuing to keep up with you and research that.
Will that be shared with us?
Yes.
Absolutely.
She has some notes that she's going to share with you tonight. You guys break into your small groups.
Yes, she's seen a couple of little tweaks, you might say, to a couple of the zones that might be very useful. And, you know, we're meeting again with the secondary group on Monday, so I've got some other examples for that group because, again, there's some unique issues that they've brought forward. Now, I'm sure some folks are chomping at the bit to see the feedback that we might provide for those, but that I just want to let folks know that might be in the back of the room that are interested in that. That's coming, and we're going to be, you know, happy to have that dialogue. I think, yeah, we were in the questions for the committee. Any further?
These non-transportation zones, like, could we have a map with a little, you know, 0.3 miles around each elementary school, or is that not necessary because it's going to change given our redistricting?
Matt said that there might be one. And
The non-transport zones are actually on here. The non-transport
you can choose that later.
and you can pick elementary, middle, and the one I was thinking about is actually at the middle school level. It's for Tuckahoe Middle. It doesn't exist for the elementary.
There was one in Ridge or something, though. There is something in the comments.
Folks have talked about Ridge.
Yeah,
But,
There is one in the elementary school.
well, if you look at, that's the thing. It's that what's communicated and what is assumed versus what is the actual non-transport zone. Sometimes they don't match.
Well, I just meant to look at it, as something to look at.
Yes.
I hadn't even noticed.
Yeah, we've looked at Ridge, and that zone's been in place for a long time, and neither of the redistricting options are going to affect that zone or take students out of it to send to Jackson Davis.
And also, just to note, we do have hard copies of plot maps of non-transport zones up front if anyone wants to look at those tonight.
So these are the non-transport zones. They're on the interactive map. We also have, like Dr. Taylor said, we have the hard copies as well.
Thought to share.
I think in this transportation area to think about is for us to also look at the middle and high school maps, even though we're not necessarily setting those boundaries, but making sure we're taking those maps into consideration. Because sometimes those things, if they're making a change, we need to look at how is that affecting an elementary zone? Is it pulling a sliver of an elementary school that we could help fix? Because I get the sense that it's typically a bus is going from an elementary school that's feeding into that middle school and that high school. They're all kind of working in their own little zone.
That's generally the most efficient way. Sometimes they cross and have to go to another zone.
So that would help, correct?
Sure. Okay, thank you all very much, and we'll give it back to Matt.